came on like Fred Astaire.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Michael Blair.
Yeah, I'm here to see you off the premises.
Well, you started it, of course, 10 years ago, didn't you? When we came back to the BBC, you're my first guest.
Yes, I was thrilled to be doing that and thrilled to be doing this, so it's marvellous. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you saw me on and you see me off now.
Yeah.
OK, now, this new book of yours, Silence Comedy, it's really a homage to the inspiration you gain, of course, from... But reading it, I mean, it seems like when you were a kid that you were trained to be a projectionist rather than a comic. Well, I got into the sort of... I was very interested in comedy from an early age, and I started seeing these people, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, on television. But it wasn't until I went to go and see them live that I actually... or to see the films live, as it were, on a big screen with a live musician, and suddenly I realised the magic of silent comedy is still there. The best of them are still as good as they always were, but you've got to see them in the right environment. They get a sort of a bum rap because you sometimes see them on TV in dodgy prints with the wrong music, and TV's a sort of screen that size. They've got to be seen on the big screen. But when they were the inspiration in the sense that you said, I want to be like that? Yes, definitely. I mean, I saw the Buster Keaton film The General when I was about 13 years old in a cinema on Oxford Street, and I was just knocked out by the fact this film was funny, and it was 50 years old at that point, and it struck me as a kind of immortality, you know, that to make a piece of work or a piece of art, a piece of comedy that still sustains 50 years later, I thought that was absolutely wonderful. Because, I mean, if you looked at Keaton's work, I mean, the famous Deadpan, the stone face, it was called. Yes. I mean, it's possible to see his influence in your appearances, and have I got news for you? Yes, to a certain extent. I think one of the first things I did as a stand-up comedian was this routine about a policeman who'd been given hallucinogenic drugs without his knowledge. And so he was just sort of giving the evidence in court in a very deadpan way, and I noticed that if he said things like... 35 minutes later, I spotted Constable Parish approaching me, disguised as a fortnight's holiday in Benidorm. So if you say that with a straight face, it's funnier than if you just sort of, you know, jollying it up. And also, on Have I Got News For You, I think that sometimes you can say something that's funny and the audience are laughing, but if you don't look as if you know what the joke is yourself, you can get an extra laugh. You say in your book, when you talk about that, doing that policeman, that was the first time at the Comedy Store that you actually... got a laugh and got the confidence maybe to think I can make a living out of this. Yes, because it was I worked at the civil service for a couple of years and I wanted to leave to become, you know, trying to become a comedian. But of course, when you've got an ambition like that, you might get to that terrible truth where you find out you can't do it. Yes. But you've got to try. And so that was sort of holding me back. I thought, well, what suppose if I try and I find I'm one of those people who had the ambition but didn't have the talent. So that put me off for a while, but I was very lucky to get that second gig went so well. It was only 3.5 minutes or whatever, but it went so well that it got me through every bad gig for 18 months. I used to have an act that started brilliantly and just used to descend really rapidly. I couldn't live up to my own material. And you also say in the book that you had, after that, you had a Chaplin moment. Going across Westminster Bridge. Yes, I did, yes. There was, the Comedy Store then was a sort of a divey sort of place in Soho, back in sort of 1982, I think. And, yes, this was such a moment for me, because to have the ambition to be a comedian, to want to be a funny person, to want to make people laugh, and then, having done it, was just extraordinary so early on. I walked back all the way from Soho to Streatham, where I had lived in a bedsit at the time, on just a cloud of joy. It was just I stood on the Westminster Bridge and looked down into the river and just sort of thought, my head was just spinning. Big Ben was showing at 3:30 in the morning. It was probably a sort of cold spring day, and it was like I was just really, literally ecstatic with joy. And I found out later on that Chaplin himself had done a gig, done reasonably well at a gig, and he'd crossed the same bridge and looked down into the river, and that sort of gave me a nice little connection with him, you know. Mind you, even with a bed city in Streatham, you were certainly several degrees higher up the social ladder than Chaplin was, because he was born into extreme poverty, wasn't he? Yes, well, initially, yes, his parents were sort of musical acts, and in the days before, you didn't have amplification, you didn't have PA systems, so somebody would be singing in a music hall, and Charlie's mother was a singer, and she'd have like a 4-piece band in front of her, and she got a very bad attack of laryngitis. Her voice started to go in the middle of this act, and the audience that had previously been on her side started booing her, and she fell into tears, and Charlie, who was 5 years old, was sort of brought on. The stage manager said, well, put him on, he'll do some sort of fun, you know, some funny stuff. He'd seen him sort of, you know, playing around. So Charlie went on and started doing impressions and imitations and loved every moment of it, you know, and that was when his career was born. But his mother, she never went back on the stage after that, and no social services, no welfare state. They got poorer and poorer, and they ended up being taken into the Lambeth workhouse. And then he became, of course, one of the richest men in the world, in entertainment. Certainly. I mean, huge amounts of money he earned in the, what, 20s and 30s? 20s and 30s, so much so nobody else in Hollywood has ever done what he did, which in the end, he made films with his own money. Yes.
You know, he actually made them with his own money.
Yes.
So if City Lights took 2 years to make, it took 2 years to make. You know, nobody was telling him to hurry up because it was his money.
Where do you stand in the debate that there is a constant debate we have nowadays about people who love all that era about Chaplin and Keaton? I mean, there's this intellectual debate goes on, isn't there?
Yes, it's a bit of a nonsense, really. It's a bit like sort of what do you prefer, oxygen or water? I mean, they're both, you know, they're both pretty good. Yeah. The thing I think about Chaplin and Keaton, you don't have to prefer one over the other. If you look at it in a historical perspective, and Charlie was making films long before Buster, and Charlie really, his genius was to raise the standard of the comedy film. When everybody else was chucking bricks at each other, he started to develop character and story and actually create a situation on the screen that actually moved people and made people feel emotion. And that was a pretty good trick for just a black and white silent image to be able to do that.
You also say in the book that what attracted you to that kind of comedy was that people laugh because people got a good kick up the arse.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's silly, but it's good, isn't it? It is funny too,
it
isn't
is.
it? It's still funny.
Yeah, children love watching adults falling over, for example,
yes.
and one adult kicking another adult up the arse for a child is heaven. Because they think that adults are meant to be sort of like fairly straight-laced individuals saying, no, you must eat all your peas, but suddenly you see Chaplin come on and just kick somebody up the arse. It's hilarious, you know.
It's funny you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's always a world motivation. There's always a good motivation behind the kick up the arse.
That's right.
It's never an innocent arse that gets kicked.
No, it's not. We're going to illustrate now a couple of points. The arse kicking we're going to see,
yes,
first of all,
okay.
And then we're going to see one of the most famous scenes of all in all silent comedy, and that's Keaton and the house.
Okay.
That is one of the great moments of cinema. That is,
yes, it is.
Comedy. Yeah.
Yes, and this is one of the things that, you know, Keaton particularly, they never faked stunts, and the front of that house weighed 2.5 tons. And the amount of clearance that he has on his shoulders and his head is 2.5 inches. And the way that they made the actual sort of set is he stood where he was going to stand and they drove nails into the ground, so he stood on his nails. They then constructed it around him, lifted it up to make sure it cleared him, then pulled it up. Got these huge wind machines on it. It had to weigh 2.5 tons because he was worried that if it warped in the wind, it would kill him, basically.
Kill him, yeah.
His assistant director on the film was so nervous about it, didn't want anything to do with it. He wasn't on the set. He was at a nearby hotel praying with a Christian Scientist. And, you know, it really was. It's one go at it. It's one go.
It's an amazing moment. No matter you see it 1,000 times, you still wonder at it, the precision of it.
Well, I talk about it in the book as saying, like, his greatest stunt needed no acrobatic skills. It just needed sheer nerve. All he had to do was just stand there while this thing came towards him.
You take this show on the road now, don't you? As well as a book, you go out and you tour the country and you show these films and you talk to the audience. And I imagine there are young people in the audience as well as older people.
It's a real range of people.
But what kind of reaction do you get? I mean, were you first of all, were you frightened maybe the prospect that this doesn't carry on into
oh well, there is. I mean, you know, I'm not saying every silent comedy is a gem, but there are so many good ones. I've been doing a show involved with some people in Bristol over the last few years. We show every January. We show a big film at the Colston Hall. 1,000 people turn up, and it was the knowledge and experience of showing those films there. I thought, well, maybe it's not just my private passion. If you actually bring people to this and put it on a big screen, and Neil Brand plays brilliant live piano, then they work really brilliantly. Yes. They really still have the power. And the one film we're showing in the second half is Safety Last with Harold Lloyd climbing up the side of the building.
That famous sequence with a clock.
A clock. Last 20 minutes of the film, I walk around the sort of theatres looking at the audience. They're sort of clutching each other like this. And the reaction is fantastic. It's as powerful now as it was 80 years ago.
Now, talk about long-running stuff. What about Have I Got News for You?
Yes.
How many years now? 18 years?
Yes. 1990 we started.
You were a young lad, weren't you, when it started?
I was very young.
Yes,
yeah, I was extremely young. I was the youngest person on television at that point.
Were you?
Yeah. There's ever been.
I mean, nobody imagined, would they, that you would get such a long-running show out of just a group of people sitting around talking about this news.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I mean, and people are always amazed when I say who, you know, the Prime Minister that we had when we started was Margaret Thatcher, unbelievably, and but she couldn't take 5 weeks of a topical news quiz on BBC Two, so she resigned, and we've seen them off on a regular basis ever since then. You know, it's the news is always changing, and I think the fact that you have a constantly expanding landscape going past you the whole time makes it interesting. It always gives you something new to talk about.
There are always gems, aren't there? Eccentrics lurking around like Boris Johnson.
Yes, yeah.
He's a gift to you, isn't he, Boris?
What? A gift? Oh, a gift, yeah. Yeah. He's definitely a gift. very rich gift.
Yes, absolutely. What sets you off on your rants?
It's usually if something funny hasn't happened for a while, I'm starting to get annoyed about something. It's just I try not to do it every week because it's a bit predictable. But you try to sort of if you suddenly see an idea that suddenly puts it forward, and you can turn angrily to somebody and just build something from that. But you don't know where they're going. You just go with it. And
you don't. You just take off.
Oh, you start a sentence not knowing where you're going to end up. No, it's a constant surprise to me.
Well, what about the other string to your boat, President? That's the travel for television.
Oh, yes,
you did this trip to China.
Yeah.
And you're off to India, I think, on the next one.
Yes, the Channel... they took a poll and they said that most people in this country would like to send you to China. So I went to China, but I got back and I'm going to India next time.
And what about China? Because, I mean, that's a mysterious country, isn't it? And you must feel totally alien there, I would imagine.
It is difficult, and also if you go to certain parts of China, they're not used to seeing tall people for a start, you know, so a tall Westerner, and some of the crew were quite tall as well, so it's like the circuses come into town when you go to some places. And the Chinese population generally think it's hilarious if they see a Westerner and go, ha-ha, hello, ha-ha-ha-ha. And they do that everywhere you go. And they just move on. They've got nothing to say to you. They go, ha, hello, ha, 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 and then they carry on. Millions of them doing it. And it's one joke, they don't tell you what the joke is. They go, ha, hello, ha, ha, and they go off.
Well, India's a place that fascinates me. I've only stopped over there on an airplane, never been there. Have you been there at all?
Yes, we did the Comedy Store Players, the show I do on Sundays. We went there about 5 years ago and had a great time. And we did a sort of improv show. And it's remarkably refreshing to appear in front of an audience that's never seen you before.
Yes.
Because you know you've got to win on your own merits rather than sort of reputation. And they loved it. Because you can do... you know, riding through one of their towns on the back of one of these sort of little motor scooter things that's got a sort of couple of passenger seats behind it and it's going around like this. We got a suggestion from somebody in the audience about riding around one of these things. So we just sort of got a chair and started screaming and shouting at the back. And they found this hilarious because we'd been on one that day and knew how dangerous they were. So us interpreting their life back for our Western eyes is great entertainment for them.
Paul Merton, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Michael.